Well, good evening, Penn Branch. I am delighted to be with you, and I was trying to remember, and I'm looking at this picture when it was taken, but I believe that I came to a meeting shortly after I was sworn in to talk about our priorities and certainly to hear directly from you. And tonight, my goal is to talk about my current budget proposal before the council and to answer your questions. So I want to go quickly through our budget proposal and leave as much time as possible for questions. I was pleased that my staff was able to be in the neighborhood just a couple of days ago, talking about the budget and inviting you to come out to the meeting and ask questions. So we are at the point now, believe it or not, in my mayoralty where we're doing things for the third time. So I delivered our third State of the District address, where I could report very emphatically that the state of the district is very strong. In fact, about the strongest it has been in the history of the District of Columbia. I also proposed to the council our third balanced budget. And in that budget, for the third time, we have been able to do the things that we promised, focus on continuing progress and prosperity in D.C., but making sure more Washingtonians are participating in that progress. So I'm going to hit on a couple of big buckets of new initiatives that are included in this budget and then turn to your questions. So let me first talk about public education. This budget includes the largest investment in public education in the history of the District of Columbia. And that's a very good sign, and let me tell you why. Because for the last 10 years, the people of the District of Columbia, the taxpayers, have made very significant investments in the turnaround and investment of our public schools. And in the last several years, in the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen steady increases in our public school population in both sectors. Traditional public schools and our public charter schools. And because of that, it has driven a lot of our increased investment in schools. This budget compared to the last budget is $100 million greater for public education. And that's going to allow us not only to accommodate all the new students that we're attracting to our public schools, but some of the very specialty programs that we have launched. Has anybody heard of the Ron Brown Preparatory High School? It's in Ward 7, and last year was its first year. It is a school focused on boys. And what we have learned in our experience with school reform, that our children are moving. Our numbers are going in the right direction, but they have moved more slowly for boys, especially boys of color. So at Ron Brown, we started with a 9th grade. This year we'll have a 9th grade and a 10th grade. And by all accounts, the school is doing better than anybody anticipated in terms of the interest, in terms of the children coming from across the city, and the interest for the upcoming school year. So we're very proud of what we're being able to get accomplished at Ron Brown. I appointed a new chancellor of schools, and his name is Antoine Wilson. I think that he has finished his spin around the city. He has held an engagement forum in all 8 wards of the District of Columbia. And those meetings are going to inform his thinking around the next 5-year strategic plan for DCPS, which is very important. So I want to thank the State Board of Education Chair who is here and who is your neighbor and friend for her leadership on the State Board of Education, because they have had some, I'm talking about you, some pretty significant work in approving new standards for the city that is going to allow us to evaluate where our children are. So let me thank you, Karen, for your leadership on that. We're also, with this budget, very focused on middle school investments. I promised at the outset of my term that we would focus on middle schools because we have experienced a lot of growing success. And Ann Beers is a fantastic example of how our early grades we're attracting families and we're moving kids and we've gained their confidence. Now we need to do the same thing for middle schools. Part of that is investing in the school buildings. And this capital budget, which spans 6 years, And in the capital budget, we have included funds to improve all of the buildings of the standalone middle schools. Chancellor Wilson is also very focused on math and extracurricular activities. So at each school, no matter where you are, there will be a robust set of offerings, both academically and outside of the classroom. So that's where we are with the school's budget. I also want to talk about affordable housing. We know that no matter where I go in the city, one of the biggest concerns that we hear from the community is, yeah, we like progress. We like more restaurants. We like more amenities in our neighborhood. But we also like, people who are moving in. But we know when a city is growing as fast as ours, we know what that does to the housing prices. They go straight through the roof. So we have, in each of our 3 budgets, pledged $100 million to the Affordable Housing Production Trust Fund. And what that represents is basically a doubling of those investments from prior years. So we've gone, when I became mayor, the previous budget had about $55 million for the Housing Production Trust Fund. And each of ours has had $100 million, or just over $100 million. We've added a component to our housing preservation efforts with just a commitment to a preservation fund that's focused on about 8,000 units that are vulnerable to losing their affordability covenant. So we're focused on that. Let me say a little bit about jobs, because we can have a big discussion about affordable housing, but if we have really big populations in our city that are underemployed or unemployed, we know we're still going to have an affordable housing problem. So we've been very focused on targeted jobs programs. And just to give you one factoid, when I became mayor, for example, in Ward 8, the unemployment numbers were over 16%. And just 2.5 years later, they're still too high, but they've gone down almost 4%. And are just over 12%. And what we have been focused on is how do we more target our efforts. So we've created several new jobs programs that are focused on DC residents. The first you've already heard of, the Summer Youth Employment Program. We named it as it should be officially in the law for Marion Barry, and it's known as the Marion Barry Summer Youth Program. And the change we made to the program was to extend the age. It had stopped at age 21. Now is extended to age 24. So youth in a very critical period between the ages of 22 to 24 can now participate in the summer youth program. Now, I got a lot of pushback from people who were critical of the idea, well, what does a 22-year-old need to be in a summer youth program? Well, the fact of the matter is we have a lot of 22 to 24-year-olds who haven't connected to school or work, and they need a chance. They need to get into a program where they can get some skills and they get an opportunity, and we're finding that they're getting that opportunity in the summer. We had 1,000 youth in the last 2 summers, and we expect to have another 1,000, a third 1,000 this summer to participate in the summer youth program. I also created a program called LEAP. And LEAP is for DC residents who are participating in some program that we have. It could be TANF, Medicaid, could be that they're experiencing homelessness and are working themselves out of homelessness. And this LEAP program trains them for existing DC government vacancies. We have a very successful example for an instance at our 911 call center. And at our 911 call center, we hadn't hired anybody in over 8 years, even though the calls for service continue to rise as our population rises. Well, our director took advantage of the LEAP program, and LEAP does not hit her budget. It actually hits the employment services budget, and she was able to hire 31 people. At the end of their subsidy period, she came to me and she said, Mayor, I don't have the subsidy anymore. I can let them go, or you can give me the budget for them. So you know which one I chose. She got the budget for them. So now we have 31 DC residents hired in DC government vacancies, and we have just a successful partnership between those agencies. So that's very good news. A new thing that we're adding to our offerings is the DC Infrastructure Academy. And we propose to house the DC Infrastructure Academy at St. Elizabeth's. And the purpose of that academy is to be a partnership between the city and the utilities and labor unions. And it is to train our residents for jobs and infrastructure that Pepco is going to be doing undergrounding. Washington Gas are changing out their pipes. Metro will be extending the Silver Line. And we want our residents trained for those opportunities. So we're also very focused on that. The last thing I'll mention is the reforms that we have made in fire and EMS. When I became mayor, that was one of the most troubled agencies. I'm about to celebrate 10 years in public office, and I had never heard the type of lack of confidence in the fire department in all the years that I've served. And now we see that all changing and turning around. I hired an excellent chief with 40 years of experience from the other Washington, Seattle, Washington, to come and help lead our force. And we have been focused on the medical side. We asked the council and got approval from the council to hire a contractor to help us with additional ambulances, and that is significantly helping us with our response times, especially in Ward 7 and 8. And this year, in this budget, we're going to try something else, and that is having a nurse at our 911 call center. Sadly, 70% of the calls we get to 911 don't need an ambulance or the emergency room. What people need is a ride, and they need to get to their own doctor. So what happens when 70% of your calls are not emergencies? The people who do have emergencies have to wait. So we have to change this paradigm, continue to educate our residents, and continue to make sure people are getting matched to their doctors. We are a jurisdiction where almost 100% of the people have access to health care. No, they have a doctor. They have insurance. And so now we have to make sure that they're using their doctor. So not only are we going to make our 911 and our ER system more efficient, we think people will be healthier if they're going to their doctor instead of going to the emergency room. So those are a few highlights that I wanted to mention in the budget. I also wanted to say some things specifically about your neighborhood. And so first, let me thank you, because you have been working hand in hand with your officers, and I see the Metropolitan Police Department in the back. I want to give them a nice thank you for their work in our community. On this Friday, I will swear in the Chief of Police, Peter Newsham, who was confirmed by the council last week. And Chief Newsham has made some changes in appointing two chiefs who are taking the place of one retiring assistant chief, Diane Grooms. And they have split up the area that she had supervision over into two areas, Rock North and Rock South. And I'm sure that the chief and the assistant chiefs will be out with the commander and with all the lieutenants for your area to talk about what we're doing. But let me just give you some good news from the last 30 days. In PSA 605, we experienced a 50% decrease in crime. 50%. That's good. Burglaries are down by 100%, and motor vehicle thefts have also decreased by 75%, and theft from autos are down 67%. So those are fantastic numbers, and we want and continue to need your support. We are also very focused on violent crime in our communities, and we recognize that we have pockets of violent activity, and the chief is very focused on initiatives to remove guns from our community. While we have seen a decrease in homicide, we want to see a decrease in all significant gun activity. And so he has plans in several of the PSAs to focus on gun interdiction. So we're going to continue to talk about that. I know economic development continues to be top on the mind of everyone, and I know that Councilmember Gray has formed a committee to work with the community members and the members of the development community, and certainly our administration will be happy to receive recommendations from that committee and work with you to have projects implemented. Some very good news is that the long and much discussed Penn branch has some activity. We think some very positive activity in having a new owner. We know that the Jair Lynch companies are working on a plan that would include retail and housing. And we will receive ideas from the developers, private of course. Most of the private developments come to the city for one thing or the other, and we will stand ready to make an investment in Penn Branch. So we look forward to your suggestions. On Skyland, we have also moved very significant legislation through the council. The developer came back to the city to reorganize parts of that development to get some parcels started. When they thought Walmart was going to be there, they wanted to start further to the west. And now I think the idea is for them to start closer to Alabama Avenue. And the city is going to make an additional investment tool that we call a TIF that we got approved through the council, and we expect them to close on those items this year and start on the first phase. So I think I'll stop there and be ready to answer your questions around other government issues.
Okay, and I will take the liberty to moderate those questions.
You got it.
Okay, so I saw the person with blue hand go up first.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sylvester Bush, and I'd like to inquire about pension benefit exclusion. In 1957, Congress initiated a law that allowed DC government retirees, federal military retirees, to exclude $3,000 from their pension when they filed their DC taxes. In 2014, the DC Council repealed that exclusion that took effect in 2015. So we formed a coalition to kind of get that restored, and I'm just concerned as to why is it taking so long to restore that? In April 25th, 2016, Councilman Jack Evans said it was a mistake, but he had to find the money. And yet, it hasn't been restored yet. So I was just wondering, what's your take on it? Do you support that? Why isn't that part of your budget to restore that $3,000 pension benefit exclusion for retirees that live in DC, that served in the military, fire police, teachers, others?
Sure, I got it. So I think that, and I think your dates are right. So I'm going to go with your dates and not my memory. And I think, at the end of every budget process, the mayor presents the budget and the council can change it. And some of those changes are made by the council chairman. And as I recall, in 2015, that was one of them. So Jack's response would be my response, because I think a number of the council members didn't know that change was made to the budget. Now, I will tell you that during our budget formulation, I don't recall the issue coming to us. And so I have to apologize that it wasn't part of our consideration, that nobody came to one of our budget engagement forums or sent it through any of our directors. So it didn't get considered in this process by us. Now, the process is ongoing, as you know. The council has the budget now. The committees are still working on them. So the Finance and Revenue Committee has the opportunity to make changes to my budget that could include that. I don't recall what the fiscal impact of that change was. And even if it doesn't get out of Finance and Revenue, it could be considered by the council of the whole.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, because we have a lot. I hope you don't mind, Sylvester. I saw a question here and then a question here.
Okay, my question is, you mentioned the LEAP.
Can you stand up so
Yeah.
everybody can hear you?
My name is Joyce Young.
Yes.
My question is, you mentioned the LEAP program. I just need to know the age range.
LEAP can be, there's no age restriction on LEAP. And let me just tell you another that I didn't mention that's also a big part of our budget. When I became mayor, our TANF program, it's our temporary assistance for needy families, was time limited. There's a lot of debate back and forth of if we should limit our welfare programs. Other states do it, and we should do it. And I'll confess, my position around the issue has evolved. When I was on the council, like a majority of the council members, I voted for time limits. When I became mayor, I saw the folly of that decision because what we were really facing was families had been all the way down to $150 per month. And once they hit 60 months, they would be kicked off the program. So my first 2 years in my first budgets, I had a temporary pause to that cliff. We called it the TANF cliff. But with this budget, we fixed the program entirely. We get rid of that TANF cliff, and we have reformed the way we are requiring recipients to work with us. Now, we're always going to have benefits for the children, and now we have a different set and more reform requirements for the parents. But part of that, the reason why I'm talking about TANF now is because a number of our TANF recipients are also our target for the LEAP program, and they do very well. And so we've identified their skill set, the training that we've put them in, and we've identified needs in the government, and that's how we're getting folks employed.
I saw one question here. And then somebody in the back.
Thank you. Luke O'Neill, 3229 Massachusetts Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome,
Yes,
ma'am.
sir.
We have a lot in common.
Yes,
Saint Elizabeth Seton
yes,
and your mother and father, we're about the same age.
yes, okay. I'll have to take your word for that, 'cause you look pretty spry.
Well, I'm 83 years old.
Okay,
This
you're
is
about
one
the
of
same
things
age.
I want to talk to you about. One of your assistants over here,
Ms.
Ms.
Paulson,
Paul, she took care of most of the things.
Well,
I want
good.
to speak about.
Okay.
Alley and water.
Okay,
Okay? But the most important thing is about seniors. As I say, I'm 83 years old. And every year I pay between $33.71.10 in taxes. You split that up every 6 months, I pay something like $16.85, $55. That's a lot of money for the average senior citizen that's over 65 or 70 years of age. Something needs to be taken under consideration for the seniors who are trying to stay in this city the way it is growing.
are you getting your 50% off?
Oh, yes,
Okay,
yes, absolutely. Now, I have 8 lots in there.
okay, so that's what I was
Okay.
about to say, that's not just,
I have a beautiful piece of property,
okay,
but still, I'm a senior citizen,
I got it.
and I'm a black senior citizen, and you know how much money we got.
You might have a lot.
I am just fortunate enough.
I got
that
it.
I can afford to take care of the utilities.
Yes, sir.
And the property there and keep it beautiful. Enter
Okay,
into South
so the
East.
unoccupied lots don't qualify, is that it? They don't
That's
qualify?
what's killing us.
I got it.
Right. That cost me something like $600 just for the, and they are adjacent to my property.
I got it.
My property my home sit right in the middle of the 8 lots that I own.
Okay, so we're
Okay,
gonna
that's-
Okay.
Yeah.
So first, let me say something, because when the questions I asked the gentleman, there's gonna be somebody in this room who's not getting the tax benefit that they qualify for. So in the District of Columbia, if you're 65 or older and your income is $100,000 or $25,000 or less, or you're disabled, you qualify for 50% off of your tax bill. All right, so let's say your tax bill, I'm not talking about your assessment, but let's say your tax bill is $3,000 a year. You would only pay $1,500 a year. So all it requires, you have to answer 3 short questions with the Office of Tax and Revenue, but you do have to sign up. So if you meet those requirements, you wanna make sure you sign up for that. Now, I have, as a council member, raised the income limit before, and I think that's something that we need to look at again, because the fact is that there could be there are 2 income senior households that are going to be over that limit, and some single households, so that people still need some relief. So I think in the next budget we'll look at ways to raise that limit. You have a very specific example. And so we should look at if there are some exceptions that could be made to the law to include adjacent lots so that all of your lots are getting the benefit. So that's an exceptional case. So let's look into see if we can do that. Now, there was proposed some years ago by Councilmember Bonds a senior property tax moratorium. I don't remember what she called it, but it was something like that. That was reworked by the council. So it still exists, but it's for a smaller number of people because it's income restricted and the income levels are pretty low. So we should go back to that. It has a big price tag in the budget, but I think it's certainly something that we can afford and invest in. So I think in the upcoming budget season, we need to look at that to see if we can get it back to the original, which I think something like you had to be 70 years or over, the income limits were higher, and it had a number of years you had to have resided in your home to qualify for the additional tax break.
Thank you.
I think we have one question here, one in the back. Oh, I'm sorry, Stan. Laura?
Okay, thanks. Good evening, Mayor Bowser.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
I visited the Skyland Workforce Center back before Walmart pulled out, which was still a going concern. And the director of that center said that of the people hired for jobs, for construction jobs, only one had come through the Workforce Center. My question is, any chance of actually enforcing first source in a meaningful way? And I'll just add that Councilman Evans is going to include the $3,000 exclusion in his budget.
Good. Do you know what the fiscal impact is?
Fiscal impact is about $3 million.
Okay.
We're going down Friday to testify before the committee of the whole and see
Okay.
if we could get Mr. Middleton on board with it.
Okay. So not only does he have to put it in his budget, he has to fund it in his budget.
Yes.
So just remind him of that. Okay.
Word of encouragement from you as well.
Okay, I'm sorry that we didn't have the opportunity to discuss it while I was formulating our budget, but it wasn't, as I recall, brought up in any of our sessions. So I will be happy to.
Can we repeat the question so we make sure?
Sure. The question was about the Skyland Workforce Center and if we are going to meaningfully enforce first source, which is the district's law requiring that DC residents be hired on jobs. The answer is yes. We've hired a very energetic director of DOES that are making some much needed reforms in that area. And a lot of not just first source, but pay enforcement and in a lot of ways. So I don't know about that specific example, but we're happy to look into what's happening there.
And I know we have a question here, but before we do, I also want to acknowledge, we have Reverend Karen Curry here, and I saw
Hey.
Reverend Kendrick Curry all the way at the back of the room. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge their
Thank-
presence.
absolutely.
Since we're in their church.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Curry. First Lady, thank you.
Stan?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
My name's Stan Benton, 3600 block of Highway Drive. For the 911 calls you talked about earlier, so you were saying that the majority of those are for non-emergency cases, and people just need a transport to the hospital.
Or to the doctor, more specifically.
When was that determined that they're non-emergency?
Oh, it's determined by our evaluation
On the phone or when they actually get there to the hospital?
when they get there.
Okay.
In some cases, it's determined on the phone, but in other cases, it's determined when they get there.
Okay. If it's, do you have to legally pick them up if they get a call?
Yes.
Okay, because I was, maybe she read.
The question was, do we have to, he asked a number of questions. How do we know that someone who called 911 isn't in fact an emergency? Some of the calls are on their face. You know, they're not when they're an emergency, but if they present that they need an ambulance, we are required to send one. Others, once we get to the scene, the evaluation by the paramedic or EMT suggests that it's also not an emergency.
Okay, so I was wondering, instead of dispatching an ambulance, you cannot just dispatch an Uber to transport?
Well,
That's a serious question.
No, I know it is, and I take it very seriously. So part of that is that we have to have a medical professional there at the call center, and that's what we're piloting now. So we will have a medical professional that can triage those calls. I personally, when I call up my doctor, there's a triage line, and I can call and I can talk to a nurse, and the nurse can help guide me to see if I should go to, so, and that is what we're trying to put in place for our 911 center. Now, this is how we're handling transportation. We have a number of our residents who are calling are on Medicaid. And the Medicaid providers that we work with, and we pay them a lot of money, are required to provide transportation to a primary care physician. So now we're looping in those Medicaid providers to help us with the transportation. Instead of using an ambulance, we're going to call on them to help provide rides for their members. You bet.
Okay. If you have questions, just to make sure we get the few questions, just stand up and keep standing. I just want to make sure. I can't see that far back. If you have questions, just stand up and keep standing. So I do see 3 people back there. Cynthia, you have a question. Please keep your questions brief, and remember, other people are waiting to ask questions, everyone. I can't hear you. Cynthia.
Okay,
please
I
step
can
forward.
I'll repeat it.
We were talking about the transportation for people who disabled, whatever, to get to the doctors. By me being a heart incident 2 years ago, and I joined him.
I'll repeat it if you just
Okay,
get.
right. Metro Asset.
Yes.
And I understand there's a lot of discrepancy now that's going on with Metro Access, that sometimes they can't get us back and forth to the doctors on time, and things like that. What are you all trying to do to help people? Because they also do Virginia as well as Maryland.
Yes. Okay.
So what are you all trying to do to get this situation
Well,
squared away?
thanks for that question. So, Cynthia's question is about Metro Access and how we can make Metro Access work better, and what are we doing about it. So a few things. First of all, we're not satisfied with how Metro Access works. The biggest issue with Metro Access is that people have to schedule in advance. And we know that people don't always know what they want to do in advance to be able to schedule it. So a lot of people are left stranded with Metro Access. Metro Access, we think, is very important for our residents who need a wheelchair. Because they have the vehicles, and they have many of the vehicles that can accommodate wheelchairs. And we pay a lot, almost I think $75 a ride on Metro that we pay. We pay Metro for every ride that a DC resident who qualifies takes on Metro Access. So we've started some other programs that are lower cost and are better, quite frankly, for people who don't need wheelchair access.
Okay.
And so one of those programs is Transport DC, where we dispatch different transportation, mostly taxi, so that people can schedule a same-day ride, and it's cheaper. So we will need to make sure you know about Transport DC, because if you don't need a wheelchair, you don't need Metro Access. You can take some of the other options that we have.
Well, my doctor's is
Okay, thank
outside.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
You
they
got
could
it.
go
You will.
outside.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Nash. I have a question with the budget surplus around schools. Is it possible to expand on the full-service community schools program?
Yes.
This is the opportunity to provide wraparound services centered at schools. A number of your colleagues in Oakland, where Antoine came from, Philadelphia, New York, are all expanding on full-service community schools.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity for us to do this?
There is, and Lindsay, can you remind me if we included it in this budget, do you recall? Okay, so we do have, sir, and I want to thank you for that question, because we have in our first 2 budgets, my commitment was to double the number of community schools that we have. And I think we started with 2, went to 4, we may be at 4 still. So we need to, and we weren't able to do it with this budget, but we will look forward to, it's still a focus of ours in getting it into the next budget season.
Thank you. I know one question here, then Bruce.
Yes.
Okay, my question is, thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having this audience, so that
Thank you.
How are we gonna do to improve this, so that more people can come and more people volunteer and make sure the things that are happening out there are benefiting our neighborhood?
Well, I appreciate that, and you may know this about me, but I come from like a grassroots background to the mayor's office, an ANC commissioner, a ward council member, and now mayor. And I challenge everybody on my team to make sure that we're listening. So one opportunity that we had to change things was with the budget process. When I was on the council, I would get frustrated because the mayors, and I've worked with two of them, would formulate the budget, send it to the council, and then come out to the community and ask about it. So what I'm doing now, say this is what we did. But what we did to change things was we went out to the community first. So in February, I had a series, and this is the third series we've done, of budget town halls across the District of Columbia. We had one here in Ward 7 at the Department of Employment Services. And so there we asked every resident to help us prioritize things, and it works very well. We had actually one of the best community engagement sessions I've ever been involved in at DOES. People were engaged in bringing forward their ideas. We do a number of different things. We've tried in telephone town halls to get to people. Sometimes we get to 5,000 or 6,000 people at a time when we do that. My staff, we catch a number of the ward community meetings, so I should always have a representative there to hear questions and bring them back to me. So we try very hard. But this community association, every time I come here, is like 100 people here. So that tells me that this neighborhood association works well together. So the first thing I would suggest is stay in touch with your neighborhood association, because they work very well with the government, your ANC commissioners. And we want to make sure that, we know you got your life to live and you don't want to follow around the government all the time. But sometimes we can get a call to you, a piece of mail. We do an electronic mailing. I've done a newsletter every Wednesday for the last 10 years, just to try to get out pieces of great information. So we'll make sure you're signed up and linked in with what we're doing.
And I know we only have a little time left, and then we have food in the back of the room. I know we have one ANC commissioner here, Bruce Finland. I know you had a question.
My name's Bruce Finland with MED Developers. First, I wanted to acknowledge something. We have about 50 buildings all over the city. We go to a lot of community meetings, and I would stress that you become involved as much as you can with this group, because every time I've come, the place is packed, people are really engaged, and just a general comment. I mean, it's very impressive, and I go to a lot of the meetings, and there's hardly anybody there. So, and, Jimmy and Steve and the other people that have put this together, they've done a terrific job, and you should all really appreciate what they've done for the community, as we have as developers.
Mm-hmm.
My question is really about Pennsylvania Avenue and the traffic patterns here. Specifically, we are developing property aside from the apartment buildings that we own and operate. And you really can't get from one side of the street to the other. This is a major problem. It's going to get worse, and it needs to be a priority. I don't know if it is a priority or not. I know that there is a study to deal with the area right at Minnesota and Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of just a small bite of what really needs to be done. I don't know if that is part of the plan.
Okay.
It needs to be. And again, if you're putting you mentioned Penn Branch and what Jair Lynch is doing, but you can't really you can't really get on one side. Once you're on one side of the road, that's it. You can't get on the other side. So it's pretty basic stuff. I don't know what you can do as mayor, but it's something that I would stress could be a real priority and will make a real change.
I got it. So thanks for that. So when you say you can't get across the street, tell me more.
If you're driving on one side of the street and want to get to the other side of the street.
Oh, okay. You mean you can't drive?
You can't go across the median. And
You might have to go a few blocks to do so.
I see.
Get off.
Okay.
Drive around, get on one of the sides, like 28th Street.
Yeah, it's not conducive to business.
Okay, I got it. So so you weren't you're talking about vehicle movements, not pedestrian movements. Okay. All right, I got it. So yes, your question about the Minnesota Bend project is going to start, I think, in about a year. And I'll have to make sure we work with the DDOT team to see how far up we can go with that project. But generally speaking, we do, and I failed to mention it earlier, we have a focus on infrastructure in this budget and pedestrian safety. And so usually the things that are good for pedestrians will also help car movements. But our first focus is making sure that people can walk and access bus and transportation. And sometimes that doesn't, sometimes frankly that means that driving across Pennsylvania Avenue may not be the safest. So we want to make sure we're making the vehicle movements make sense, but certainly that we're making the pedestrian movements safer. So we're very focused on that. And I think that what makes sense is that we have a specific conversation, especially as we get closer to the project, of what the safety improvements around the intersection are and how far we can go up. Let me say another word about infrastructure, because we have, how are your local roads, the condition of the local roads, your neighborhood roads? Are they good? Are they excellent? Are they 100% great?
Very good now.
They're very good now. Okay, they're better? All right, so let me say a bit about local roads. We do a pretty good job in the city of our main arterials. All right, there are only 7% of them that are in poor condition. I can't say the same for our local roads. Over 30% of them are in poor condition. So what we have in this budget is included a state of good repair plan for our local roads. And some of you will have know about our plan for Alley Palooza. Anybody heard of Alley Palooza? So Alley Palooza is kind of a alley improvement project on steroids that we went out and we're on our 5th Alley Palooza now, Alley Palooza number 5. And on Alley Palooza number 5, we do 8 alleys in 8 wards in 8 weeks for each of those. So we'll have over 300 alleys completed just with the Alley Palooza program. And that is how we intend to go after our local roads projects, and making sure that, and this budget includes more money. Now I have to ask you to inform your council members that you want local roads to be a priority in this budget, because sometimes what happens is they skim a little bit every year off the local roads projects, a little bit every year, and that compounds, which means we can't get to all of our projects. So that is very important for us to be able to focus on. And I just want to make sure DDOT doesn't have anything else to add on the Minnesota Bend project.
I'm happy to talk to anyone after.
Okay.
We have specific spots, but
All right.
Okay, make sure.
yeah, I can figure out.
And I know we have a question here. I just want to limit the question, so I know we have 3 more, at least 3 more. I saw you, Reverend Curry. I can barely see. Okay. I didn't forget you.
Pastor, thank you again
That's
for
all
your
you.
hospitality. Thank you, Mrs. Curry. Yes.
I wanted to make reference to what was said about the
Excuse me.
walking in the area.
Yes.
I lived in this area my entire life, and when I was younger, my mother would not let me get off at Penn because a child had been hit and killed in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was fine when I was in high school. But once they did the beautification of the street, and they took off that island that makes the right turn, the right turn, the green right turn sign will come on. The crosswalk you used to not be able to cross Pennsylvania Avenue directly that way.
Got it.
And so what
I'll
happened,
repeat
I
it.
said you used to not be able to cross Pennsylvania Avenue on the other side. You used to have to cross at the Exxon. And so when they did the beautification and they allowed the pedestrians to be able to walk, they took away that island and they took away the sign saying do not walk. And my daughter and I almost got hit the other day because the car was focused on getting around the corner.
Yes.
You could do right turn on red.
Yes.
But it was, we had the right of way.
I got it.
And so in taking away that island and causing the driver to not have to really pay attention and they zoom around anyway, it makes it very difficult. In addition, at Penn Shopping Center, there's a very large do not turn left sign. And vehicles will do that constantly. There is an incline you're going up Branch Avenue, you can't see if you're driving up Branch Avenue, so you know the people turning left, they can't see either. Someone's going to die or get seriously hurt.
Okay.
If they don't figure out a way to stop people from making that left turn out of the mall area.
I got it.
And the police can't do anything about it, cause I say it, they don't stop, or they might be able to catch a couple of people doing that, but they say, oh, I didn't see it.
Okay.
And so what happens is
I'm
they
sorry,
block
I'm gonna-
it.
So it is an illegal turn already.
illegal turn.
I got it.
Left turn.
I got it.
Yes.
I got it. Thank you for that. Got it.
Okay, thank you. So next question, I'm having trouble keeping in order. No, we'll go Reverend Curry, because you're closer, and this is your church.
Let me just say thank you, Mayor, for coming out to Ward 7 tonight, to the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, and certainly the Penn Citizens Civic Association. To keep it brief, can you share anything with regard to healthcare and specifically a hospital as it relates to United Medical Center and its particular challenges? And I understand we will have a new hospital somewhere in Ward 7 or 8. What happens in the meantime, particularly in light of some of the challenges at United Medical Center?
Yes, so let's talk about UMC. And I have had the privilege of working on UMC very directly for the last 2.5 years. And UMC has been in some trouble for the last a lot of years. And so there have been a lot of iterations on trying to work on UMC. And we continue to do it until we have the great plan. So let me kind of start about what our discussion around UMC is not. It is not a real estate discussion, all right? And I think that sometimes people say, we talk about real estate and new this, we're not talking about the first thing that has to be taken care of, and that's having a healthy operation. And we have to have a healthy operation until we get to a new hospital. And quite frankly, when we really started looking at UMC, when I was on the council, we approved a very large budget to subsidize the hospital, and the board also approved the hiring of a contractor. And the contractor was excellent. We paid them $5 million a year to operate the hospital. They brought in all of their people. When the contract was up, they took all of their people, and the operation wasn't any better. So that's the point at which I became mayor, that we had a hospital that had been doing okay for a few years under this $5 million operator. And when the $5 million operator was gone, so were the efficiencies in the know-how about how to run the operation. So what we've decided to do, we do have an operator that does part of what Huron used to do, but we're training the in-house staff and getting the in-house capability to get the operation healthy. So that's where we are right now. We are also doing a feasibility study that not only focuses on location. Now, it's my belief that the hospital isn't located in the right place to best serve the most people in Ward 7 and 8. And let's face it, we want a hospital for all 8 wards, not just for Ward 7 and 8. So we want to build a hospital that will attract the type of physicians that people from anywhere in the city or anywhere in the region will come, because that's when you're going to get a healthy operation. Because while there are 160,000 fantastic people in Ward 7 and 8, most hospitals draw in a much bigger area for their patients. And the fact is that people follow their physicians, wherever they are. And so if we build the type of facility and have the program where physicians want to locate, then we're going to be able to draw people to the hospital from many places. So what our feasibility study will do is demonstrate a location that is good, but also the configuration of services that's going to be feasible in this market, in the Washington, D.C. market. So what I've asked my team to do is to be prepared to give me those recommendations in the next several months. So that we know a location, and we also know the type of mix that's going to work in this market. And when I'm talking about the DC market. And then we're also trying to attract a partner, okay? So DC government doesn't do hospitals well, all right? We want to get out of the hospital business. We've tried it a couple of times, and no governments really do hospitals well. Hospital providers and educational and research facilities, they do hospitals well. And so our intent is to attract a partner to help, to run the hospital and take that off of the DC government, because we know that they will do a better job. So to entice somebody to take it, now, nobody's out there in the market to say, hey, I want a struggling hospital. Here I am. So to entice them, we are going to put together a package that includes the capital, some of the capital. We want them to help with some of the capital, and we're going to have a healthy operation. So those are the three parts we're working now on with the hospital. So there's been some question about, well, you're going to just use the capital on the old hospital. Well, we would if it needed it, because that has to work. But the arrangement that we will make with the board of directors is that any and all of those approvals for capital come through the government. And so we will put them on a plan for capital spending to maintain what is necessary at the hospital until we have a new location. I know that was a long answer, but it's an important one.
I think you had everybody's attention.
Okay.
On that one. Yes! Our ANC commissioner's always good.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for your support of Skyland.
Yes.
I'm also elected to another position in Washington Teaching Union.
Okay.
So we talk about halfway to middle class. Today is National Teacher Appreciation Day.
Thank you, teachers.
I want to know, where are we on a fair contract with WTU? Teachers have not had a pay increase since fiscal year 12. We're in the
Six before that. You haven't had a contract in 6 years. Right.
fiscal year 12.
Okay.
So
Right.
I just want to know, where are you in that, because the mayor now runs the school?
Yeah, that's correct. So here's where we are. See, the thing about a negotiation is, hold up. You know the thing about a negotiation? There are two sides. So I can speak for my side. I don't know if you can speak for your side, but I can speak for my side. So that's what I want to do. I want the teachers to get a raise. I want a contract. I want to be the mayor that gets the contract. I don't want to be the mayor that goes 4 years without a contract. All right, I want to be the mayor that gets the contract, but it does have to be fair. It has to be fair for everybody. So I, quite frankly, don't know why there were no real contract discussions for 4 years. I don't know that. But I can tell you what we've done in our administration. In fact, I could sit down with Liz, the president, and I said, look, Liz, we're getting a new chancellor. Let's have this done before he gets here. And we set aside about 15, now you know there's some things that I can't talk about because it would violate fair negotiation. But I will talk about the effort that we've put into getting it done. So in December, I think we set aside 12 days where for 12 days, we tried to hammer out an agreement. And we weren't able to get it done. And I do think that we have, I'm going to be fair, and I want our teachers to have a raise. But I will say, and because I don't want anybody to think that our teachers haven't gotten more money in 6 years, because there have been, the vast majority of our teachers are getting bonuses and steps. And so, and I may have that wrong. This is the COLAs that we're working to negotiate. So that's where we are with it. And I actually think that we're going to get there.
Okay, so the last, because I had a meeting today.
Okay.
You had a meeting today, and so the thing now is the ball is in your court, in the chancellor's court. We're waiting to meet with the chancellor and start.
Well, I have to correct you, okay? Because the city administrator, I'm going to correct you. So you may not know this, but the city administrator had a meeting scheduled with the WTU president that she canceled. The chancellor doesn't need to be there. Chancellor doesn't need to be there. That's not the negotiating team at this point. Okay, so so to be fair, we're at the table. We need you at the table. Can't do it alone. Two sides.
Okay, Mr. Hughes, we got two questions in front of you, and then I'm going to promise to get to you. We got Reverend Curry, the other Reverend Curry, the prettier Reverend Curry. I'll take that. to, go ahead, Mr. Downey.
I'm Stephen Downey, I'm a resident of the area, obviously, and I chair the Pennsylvania Avenue East Economic Development Committee, and we've been focused for about the past year and a half to really get the city's attention on what we feel is a really underserved corridor in the city area, Pennsylvania Avenue East of the river. One thing that comes up frequently is the amount of immense development that's happened down the Anacostia River and other parts of the city, like the waterfront, the Park Bridge project that's happening in Lincoln Capitol Hill and Ward 8. Does the city have any plans, or what are your plans for improving access to and use of Anacostia and Ward 7?
Well, we actually, I was in Anacostia Park, and I'm going to not get the right name of the group, to talk to them about the plans for the Anacostia and how we can work better with the National Park Service. So there's some ideas, and I think a lot of energy around the park itself. And there are also some ideas around connections as the plans around the RFK site develop to connect the both sides of the river. So we are really looking forward to working with the Anacostia waterfront project. And I think that the most energy at this point is around improvements in the park itself. Is that your understanding?
That's understanding, but also just for the fact that even if you look at the, if you come across the bridge, it's not even obvious how you can get to waterfront.
No, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And so that was one of the big things that we talked about that day, just improving access, bus access, programming, so that there's something to do once you get there. And I think that's big. Now, I think there are differing opinions among the group about how much it should be developed. Some thinking that the natural is just fine, and others wanting it to be more programmed with hardscape and the like. So I think there's a lot of discussion that still needs to happen, and a lot of work we have to do with the National Park Service.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And I know I'm gonna cap questions just so we can have a little time afterwards. So we have Mr. Hughes, Mr. Lloyd, and Reverend Curry.
All right.
Mr.
Mr. Hughes.
Mr. Lloyd and
Oh.
Mr. Hughes. So we'll go
Okay.
Mr. Hughes, and then Mr. Lloyd and Mr. Curry.
Thank you.
We have one of the worst scheduled roads probably in this city, and it's going through Fortune Farm Park, Massachusetts Avenue, Texas Avenue. It's like
Okay, you're talking about, okay, the roadway conditions, okay.
They cleared it a little bit last year, but it's really terrible.
Okay.
So it's between Mass
Mass,
Southeast
okay.
and Texas Avenue.
Okay, we're making a note of that, sir, so that we can get the report back to you.
Okay, and I know we have two questions.
Okay.
I also want to mention that we.
No, go ahead.
I know we have Melinda Bowling, Director of DCRA in the room, and one of our neighbors over here in the back of the room. And so, like I said, after this, we're not going to take any more questions. So, Mr. Lloyd.
Hello, good evening,
Hi.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm pretty sure that, as well as just me, other people definitely appreciate that you came out to speak with us.
Sure.
But my question I wanted to start out is, are you familiar with the term esports?
Yes.
Okay, well, how much do you know about it? Anything past competitive video gaming?
Well, why don't you just ask me your question?
Okay, well, this meeting is in reference to economic development, and esports is an insane industry. Like, this year is projected to, just from North America alone, it's about $352 million will be spent within that industry. And just recently, there was a partnership between Vince DC, I followed you at South by Southwest, where they have a partnership with NRG Gaming. Now, at the live video conference that you guys had speaking about it, I don't believe that you were on that panel, but NRG specifically said that they didn't have any plans to do anything in DC to support having, like, they have what's called the NRG House, which is where they support people that are competitive gamers so that they have just a home base to live out of while they're pursuing their professional career. I work with kids, and I understand a lot of, not just the financial benefits of gaming, but also the mental health and cognitive benefits. Who would I get in touch with if I wanted to get in touch with the city, and who would be contributing or supporting something like that from the district government?
It is with Events DC. They are, and they now are what used to be our Sports and Entertainment Commission, and so they're all at Events DC. And Eric Moses is the Senior Vice President, I think is his title, that you should speak with. The chairman of the board and the staff recognize that gaming is happening and that we need to be in it. And I think Events DC has made a small investment, I think, in promotion, as I recall. And I think one of the sports owners here, Ted Leonsis, is getting involved as well. So I think there's a lot of energy around it. Some investors need to come together because we are the sports capital. Capitals, Wizards, Nationals, you get it? So, and we're gonna open DC United, our football team, one of these days is gonna come back to the district and become winners. And so we are very interested in all of those things. In next year, around this time, our sports and entertainment arena is gonna open at St. Elizabeth's in Ward 8, which is gonna give us a lot more opportunities for some of these big gaming events that I understand thousands of people come to watch people play video games. But we have another arena that is of suitable size for events like that.
And we have Reverend Curry.
Thank you.
Reverend Karen Curry.
So I get to have the last word.
Thank you,
Somebody
Madam
told me
Curry.
always.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mayor, for coming and for staying.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So forth. We appreciate that. I received an email from a grandmother who has I received an email from a grandmother in the community who has 2 students at Ballou, and she's very concerned about what she has learned, or what she's calling severe budget cuts, coming mostly to schools in Ward 7 and 8. And so I've not verified all of that, but I did want to bring that up. She sent an email saying that the Inspiring Youth Program, Ballou, Anacostia, Woodson, Hart, Kramer, Patterson, and Savoy are all receiving severe budget cuts for fiscal year 2018. So I don't know,
Sure.
where those schools.
So as I mentioned earlier, we have a $100 million increase in public education. And you also know that all the money follows the child. And so that's how monies are distributed to schools. And so there's no cut to a school that wouldn't follow its population. And so I would have, and Anna, you could help me with this, or you know anything in particular about the schools that were mentioned, especially Ballou. I want to give you a specific answer. The other thing that happens, and sometimes staff are let go at schools, and the community are told it's because of budget cuts, and sometimes it's because of staffing decisions, and that the school chooses to do something else with those budget dollars. And so sometimes that can be mixed feedback that comes back to the community rather than saying, you know, we decided to do something different here. Thank you. So let me thank you, Penn Branch, for your attention and for working for us throughout the year. And don't hesitate to call on my office. Thank you.